In 2024, Syque Caesar watched from the transfer access zone as one of his athletes, Stephen Nedoroscik, would be responsible for winning or losing the bronze medal for the U.S. men's gymnastics team. It was the pommel routine seen around the world that clinched the bronze for the U.S., a first since 2008. While important, that one moment of glory is only a small snippet of Syke's story. An Olympian himself, Syke's resume is not short on accomplishments. He is a three-time NCAA national champion, the head coach of the EVO Men's Senior Elite Gymnastics Program, and a brevet gymnastics judge. For those new here, I'm Kensley, the host of Neutral Deductions, a podcast all about men's gymnastics. This is episode 54, where I'm joined by Olympian Syque Caesar, and we are diving into his story. Welcome, Syke. I am so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am also thrilled to be here.
So Syke and I go back actually quite a long ways. I was the manager, one of the managers for the men's gymnastics team at the University of Michigan when Syke was competing, and he was one of the captains for the gymnastics team there. And he really sort of helped start me on my way in gymnastics. And I would run over to the sideline and ask athletes oh, what was that skill? And what did that mean? I didn't really actually know a lot about men's gymnastics when I started with Michigan. So I'm glad that we've kind of had the opportunity to grow together over time. But one of the ways I wanted to start this interview was actually to talk about a mentor to both of us, which was Jeff Corgan, who was one of the coaches at Michigan. And Jeff Corgan, he was an exceptional athlete. He, like I said, he was the coach at Michigan, and he saw my passion for the sport, and he kind of pulled me aside one day and said, Kensley, we need someone who has your passion, who's willing to cover men's gymnastics, and I want to help you kind of grow in that way. And I know, Syke, for you, Jeff was a huge mentor and a huge part of your life. So I wondered if you could sort of talk about him and the different avenues that he coached you from Michigan all the way through the Olympics.
Yeah, Jeff was my personal coach while I was at Michigan from 2000, since the back half of 2010 all the way until 2014 when I finished up my gymnastics career. He had just a really interesting understanding of the sport in a way that when he spoke about it, it sounded a little bit different than what I had heard before, but it really resonated with me. So we made a really good coach-athlete team. And as you had mentioned, he was a huge reason as to why I even got into coaching. And he was hugely impactful on me. Through gymnastics, we traveled the world together. He took me to my first international meet, which was the 2011 Tokyo World Championships. Took me to the Olympics in 2012 London. Antwerp for the 2013 World Championships, and then even down to Glasgow in 2014 for the Commonwealth Games. So we went all over the place together across the world internationally and then domestically with Michigan. Won a few championships together, which was pretty cool in 2010, 2013, 2014.
Now, your time at Michigan, it wasn't just solely dedicated and focused on gymnastics. You actually have 2 degrees. You have a degree in communications and then a master's in sports management. So there were so many different avenues that you could have taken within the realm of sports. And I'm curious, was Jeff what made you want to go into coaching, or had you had this pull otherwise?
Jeff actually was part of the reason why I got into my master's program for sport management, because I was injured twice during my career, once during my sophomore year and then once during my senior year. And I actually had the ability to do medical redshirt, but I had to submit the second time because I was already in my 5th year. And the only way to get the 6th year was to be enrolled in classes at the graduate level. So one thing led to another. It's well, if you apply for this and you get in, then you could still compete one more year. So I like to say, thanks to Jeff, I was the first 6th year before everyone thought it was the cool thing to do these days. Now everyone's doing 6 years. Now, as far as coaching goes, I never really took trying to get into coaching seriously as a career. I always thought it was like the job ex-gymnasts take when they can't find a real job. And I was like, well, you can't use my degree to get a real job, so I'll do gymnastics because that's what I can do. But that's not what the actual case is. That's just what my thoughts were, and that knowing what I know now, that's like far from it. Uh, Maybe not for everyone. Uh, and so towards the end of my collegiate career, a bunch of athletes on the team, really the alums and the guys who were like juniors, seniors when I was a freshman, they were the ones that are like, Syque, you've got to get into coaching. Like, you're obsessed with this sport. You help us out all the time. Um, like, you're made to do this. And I said, all right, like, I'll give it a go, I suppose. It took a couple years until I got into coaching officially. But yeah, I'm just a huge gymnastics nerd, a fanatic, a student of the sport. I mean, even so, we have numbers at Michigan. Like, each athlete, each guy has a number, and my number is 33. Because I was so obsessed with watching men's gymnastics on YouTube back in the day in 2008. And my number is 33 because that's how many subscribers I had back in the day.
That's an excellent tidbit. Oh my goodness. Now, for those of you the listeners who don't know, can you kind of walk us through what the transition was from student athlete now into your coaching role at Evo? Like, what happened in the years in between?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I'm entering my 10th year of coaching officially, outside of like camps and clinics when I was a collegiate gymnast and stuff like that. Um, so I put the grips up in 2014 while at Michigan. I still had one more year of my master's program. So I joined on to the staff as an administrative assistant, basically pushing papers from the 2014 to 2015 season. While on the job, I started thinking more about, hey, maybe I should start getting into coaching. I'm liking it. I'm in the gym with the athletes and coaches, but I'm not allowed to coach. And I'm like, that's all I want to do when I'm in here. So I started reaching out to a bunch of collegiate coaches because I wanted to be part of the college stuff. And one thing led to another. And actually, I think I reached out to Justin Spring at Illinois, didn't have a position available. Basically, I was looking at programs that, for my thoughts, you're allowed two assistant coaches. So I was looking at programs that had one head coach and one assistant. So I was like, okay, if there's only one assistant, maybe they probably have a second assistant position possibly available. So those were the schools I was reaching out to. And then I landed on Brett McClure, who at the time was a head coach at Cal. And he was like he was like my first real mentor kind of in this whole industry. And I asked, is there a spot, or do you have a spot open for an assistant coach? I'd love to do it. And he said, I don't. Unfortunately, I would love to have you, but I simply don't. However, you should talk to Stanford head coach Tom Gleamy, because he potentially does have another spot available there as for a second assistant. And so basically one thing led to another, started that process and the interview process, and got the job. I called Brett up and I was like, hey, I got it. He's like, that's so cool, man. Just understand though, in like 5 years time, I expect you to come back and work for me. And I'm like, sure, whatever. I just want a job. I was just like, yeah, of course. So then I started coaching at Stanford of June of 2015 until December of 2021. So about 6.5 years. The first 4 years were pretty intense, and was coaching the boys club program, Stanford Boys Gymnastics, SBG for short, for the first 4 years concurrently while coaching, assistant coaching with the varsity program. So those years were pretty wild. I would be traveling all over the place for a junior meet and go to, varsity team, then come back to the junior meet. And it was insane, but I learned so much in that time, just those 4 years. But then continuing on through the rest of the next 2.5 years, the amount of stuff I just learned about the sport, about how to run a gym, and training plans and strength and conditioning, gymnastics technique, just like everything was like insane. And I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. Got to work with some of the best athletes in the country. I mean, like Grant Breckenridge, Akash Modi, David Jessen, Brody Malone, Kern Phillips, Brandon Briones, Ian Gunther, Ryder Lewis, Jeremy Bischoff, Colt Walker. There's so many athletes I was blessed to have been able to recruit and work with. And but the time had come. By the end of that, after the Olympics, I had gotten a call from USA Gymnastics they were looking for a new coach at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Training Center for the men's resident program. So I jumped on it right away, um, got the job, and moved to Colorado Springs in January of 2022. So I tried to plant roots there. At the time, there were four athletes there: Robert Neff, Shane Wiskus, Eddie Penev, and Alex Diab. So it was a small program right after the Olympics. Lots of guys have retired, so we're kind of in this rebuilding phase. I'm the new coach, so we're trying to, I'm trying to get my footing. But that year was crazy in 2022 because got the job started the job in January, bought a house in March. We had our first child in June, and then I left in November. So in 11 months, I was in literally 1 year, I moved across 3 different states. Basically, there's some backstory, but this program at Sarasota started up at Evo Gymnastics, starting to fund athletes to pay them to train full time. And so 2 of the athletes I was working with, Alex Diab and Shane Wiskus, got that call. When I got back from paternity leave, they're like, "Hey, we want to talk." And I was like, "This is a great opportunity. You should do it." So then I went to USAG and was like, "So what do I do? Like, do I have a job after this?" And they're like, "Probably not." They're like, "Well, what do you want me to do?" They're like, "Well, you should probably get a job at Evo." I'm like, "Okay, great, thanks." So one thing led to another, was able to come down to Evo. Haven't looked back since December 2022. So I've been here about 2 years now, and it's my second longest job so far.
Yeah, you talked about the tension in the year of 2022 and what a big year that was for you personally, and the multiple moves and the do I have a job, do I not have a job, and all of that. But I know that you and I have also had some conversations about you came in with what you had learned from Michigan and from Stanford and about creating these different plans. And you've talked publicly about how some of the athletes bought in immediately and how some of the athletes didn't buy in. And can you talk about that tension at the US OPTC and then how that maybe prepared you for a transition at EVO where you had even more gymnasts coming from more different ideas and previous training programs?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm a young coach coming into the, Olympic Training Center with athletes who are already seasoned and older. The median age was like 24, 23, 24 years old. Eddie is actually older than me by a couple of weeks, in fact. So I'm coaching athletes like literally at the top end of the age spectrum. And so coming in with some change, but while I think they were open to it because it was a change. And so they needed to be open to the change and want to do something different. I came from a really strong program at Stanford as a coach, came from a really strong program as a gymnast at Michigan, kind of bringing those 2 things to the table. And by the end of my time at Stanford, had done everything with the collegiate landscape of things as far as I wanted to do with winning a couple NCAA championships and then helping Team USA with guys on the national team and Olympics with those guys. So that I kind of led with. It was like, there's stuff that I learned. I also want to learn some new stuff and implement some of my own spin on it that I've had ideas for a long time, but for whatever reason wasn't able to implement them because I wasn't in charge. And so we started with just like a team meeting, one-on-one meetings with each guy, what they wanted to do, how I can assist, what I think I can do for them. And it was a tough couple of months for three months just to get everyone to buy in. Some guys bought in right away, like Alex Diab was like instant, just a soldier. Shane was a little bit challenging at first. No surprise. I mean, he's an Olympian. These guys come in with all this experience, and so there's always a little friction when you change something when you've already had some sort of level of success. So it was more just became a relationship thing between coach and athlete, how best I can coach each person. And what helped me was to understand that, like, while I want to create a team environment, each individual needs to have some sort of individualized treatment, and that works best for them. Some guy might like getting yelled at, and some guy might like getting a hug, right? And it's better for me to assist them knowing how each guy operates. So by the end of the time at the training center, I think everyone's already bought in, but then the time was cut pretty short. So
Yeah, I think that leads into a good transition about your time in Evo and who came with, and then the building of the staff. I know for me personally, the number one question, without a doubt, that I get from media, from fans, from parents is, how did Evo get started? What is Evo? How are they staying afloat? Like, what athletes are coming? And so I really want this next section to sort of be from your own words as the leader of this program. How did this program get started? Who were the key stakeholders? And then how has it evolved from when you first started to where it is now?
yeah, it's pretty loaded. I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. So a lot of the start of Evo um, really comes from the umbrella company Powers Gymnastics. So they came together. Their CEO met with Kevin Majaika. They met at basically through a gymnastics competition. And the story is actually pretty incredible, which is they were both watching a gymnastics meet with some high level athletes, guys on the national team. And CEO was just like super impressed with the amount of gymnastics they're doing, the level of athleticism, and that these guys represent Team USA. And so he asked Kevin, how are these guys making a living? Like, oh, they get a little bit of a stipend from making the national team for USA Gymnastics. And he's like, well, how much is that? It's not a lot. In fact, it's pretty low. If that's all you're trying to survive off of, it's barely survivable.
Yeah, the top tier that we have right now in the US is $3,000. And that's if you've won a medal at the last Olympic Games or you won a medal at the previous two World Championships. So $36,000 for the year is the max that you're making on national team.
Exactly. So it's not a lot, and you just named it for the top guys.
Right.
So not everyone's the top guy. And so uh, from that moment, he was like, well, we got to help these guys. Like we were trying to make these guys win the Olympics, and they can barely make ends meet. Like that's not good. I think that we can do something about it. And so that's how the genesis of the idea to fund athletes came from, with the hope to support them financially so they can train full time, help Team USA get on the national team, and then the real big picture is to get Team USA back on the podium. In this past Olympics, which check mark, and then the next big lofty goal is to get on top of the podium in LA. So that's the big lofty goal for Evo. After that conversation happened at that gymnastics meet, Kevin Majaika, 3-time Olympic team head coach, moved down to Florida, and Evo had already existed in the past, but Powers had purchased the facility. It was like, let's make this the place. And so kind of changed the whole training facility into what it is now.
And for those who are listening who are maybe newer to men's gymnastics, this had been a long-standing issue where many really talented athletes like Jake Dalton or Jonathan Horton had said, I have a wife and I have kids and I would love to keep training, but realistically, I need funds to support them. Typically, although this hasn't necessarily been the case most recently, but in the past, men's gymnasts were much older than the female athletes competing and often did have families to support. And so it was maybe a little bit of a different model than female athletes who were maybe in that 16 to 18 range, still living in their parents' house, being supported that way. And so what Kevin and Power Gymnastics, what their goal was to be able to support male athletes being able to continue longer as they were potentially in a different stage of life than many of their female counterparts.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And I think what we're doing is important. I think it's honorable what we're doing because, as you had mentioned, usually later in the male athlete's career or a men's gymnast career, usually mid to late 20s is when they really hit their stride. And so what we've seen in the past is after collegiate gymnastics, 22, 23-year-olds are having to make a decision like if I want to continue, how much longer can I continue in my current situation at at a college when I'm not getting scholarship, I have to pay for housing, I'm not on a meal plan, I'm not really part of the team anymore either. So all that stuff that the universities were able to provide really can't really provide it anymore once you're no longer on that team. And so it's always been a difficult thing. On top of that is the financial component is really number one. It's financial and then really medical. And at universities, each program has a designated athletic trainer and medical staff, but they're seeing hundreds of athletes, right? And they're overworked like crazy. And so the value proposition at Evo was the financial components, being able to pay the athletes so they can actually make a livable wage and not have to try to be an Uber driver to make ends meet, and also provide medical that is just as important, if not more important, than the actual gymnastics training as an older athlete to stay healthy and prolong your career. And so we have medical as well. And without having to focus on, 50 to 100 different athletes, a handful of a dozen or more dozen athletes only. So that's really the big value proposition. On top of that, being able to have a world-class facility and a great group of coaches who are really all bought into this. That's why I think what we're doing at Evo is special and important. And also, I think it shouldn't be just Evo. I think there needs to be other programs to do this because we need parity. We need competition. More competition is going to be better for Team USA. Our goals for Team USA. We can't have everyone. We can't save everyone, but we're trying to do our part. And really, and all it just comes down to helping Team USA.
You've referenced the coaches several times. So can you elaborate who are the other coaches who work alongside you on a daily basis?
Sure. So Kevin Majajka is basically, he is the executive director of this whole project. I call it a project, but we're now, we're officially a business. But he's the executive director and founder of this whole thing. First hired Sam McCulloch. You may have heard of him. He was a pretty good gymnast back in the day, 6-time national champion, 3-time Olympian. He was really incredible gymnast. So hired him on early on. Also hired Sergey Pakanich, who is and has been probably the greatest junior developmental coach in a long, long time. Probably one of the best there is on the planet. Moved over from Woga in Texas. Also hired Jason Furr. You may have seen a video of this guy doing the world's highest Kovacs. That's Jason. Came from a successful program in Virginia, and Kevin actually used to coach him back in the day when he was on the senior national team. And then we have Grant Britton, who runs our boys program. He's the head coach of our entire boys program as well. And then myself. So we have a pretty big coaching team, and we all work together in several different layers from the junior ranks all the way up to the senior ranks.
I know I want to say it was summer or fall of 2023. I had started to hear some whispers that maybe Powers Gymnastics was pulling out of Evo, and the continuation of Evo was a little bit uncertain. And I know currently that y'all are in more of a self-funded model. So can you share what that transition was like from being under Powers Gymnastics to the model that you're currently under, and then elaborate on how you are fundraising to stay afloat?
Yeah, totally. So we are fully autonomous and self-funded now. So we run Evo Gymnastics as the gymnastics facility and club program business. But in that transitional period with the management of the whole thing, we created a nonprofit organization, MAG Foundation USA, MAG standing for Men's Artistic Gymnastics. And it's the foundation for the USA. It's exactly what it is. And so we take in donations, sponsorships, and the like, and the funds that are being brought in through MAG Foundation USA go directly to help support the athletes financially. So that is the whole mission of MAG Foundation. While it is to help the athletes that are here at Evo, the bigger picture, it's by doing so we're helping Team USA, and that's kind of the big picture.
And as we're in the transition from the Olympic year to the new Olympic cycle, have there been transitions in the athletes who are training there? I know you just had the big announcement about Josh Karn signing on. So walk us through who are the athletes who are now training, the senior ones, and then maybe name one or two of the up and coming junior names as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think another thing from a training standpoint of what makes us unique is that we do have junior athletes training alongside Olympic level athletes. So they're already seeing kind of what it takes to get to that next level. And hopefully we're setting them up for success, whether that's in the collegiate route or the elite route. And so I think that's another kind of value proposition we have with our team. So starting from the younger generation, I mean, just kind of up and down the list, we have some phenomenal athletes, all the way down to like level 5 to level 6, like going all the way up and kind of a hot shot in each level, but going more towards the elite, junior elite pathway. Danilo Lakin is a phenomenal athlete. He's part of our senior development group. So we have a senior development group, a JE group, and a senior elite group, all who train in the AM session of our schedule. And that's like kind of our top athletes and invite only type situation. So Danilo Lakin is he's been around now. He's been here since Sergey had moved down. So Sergey is his coach. We've also have a new member, Kyle Jordan. And so his previous coach, Mitchell, is actually now the assistant coach at Stanford. And so he moved over here from Oregon, and they just competed this last weekend at West Point Open, and he won floor. So we're going to put that petition in for Winter Cup. We have another athlete, Alex Karadjov, and he's he can actually compete USA or Bulgaria. He's still on the fence there. He's just a beautiful, elegant gymnast. And so then as we move up to the tiers, this last year, what I consider our first class, special group of individuals with Alex Diab, Brody Malone, Stephen Nedoroscik, Carden Phillips, and Shane Wiskus, of whom 4 will be returning. Carden Phillips is retired and will be starting medical school next fall at my alma mater at Michigan. Alex Diab has been already training full-time here. He never really skipped a beat. Brody will be returning in a couple weeks to get back into training. Shane is already in the gym. It's more of a recovery year for him. And then we're looking forward to Stephen returning as well in the future.
Can you share, did the change of the 2025 World Championships format have anything to do with incentivizing the return of any of your athletes?
Yeah, totally. So at the December national team camp, we literally found out in the middle of a training session, and I can see in just like Brody's face, he was like, "Oh, there's more people now? Okay, that's a little more interesting." And then literally 3 turns later, he jumps up on high bar and does a Casino Coleman connected after not training for like 2 months. So that changed a lot of things for him, for sure. And I think even more than just the athletes I work with, I think all the athletes are like, okay, now it's actually seems logical or a potential opportunity for me to make it if I bring an event or 2.
Yeah, the change for the World Championships format, I think, is going to have a huge impact on who we actually see return to sport this year, because previously it was only 3 athletes. It was basically like a glorified World Cup, and now they've doubled the amount of male athletes to 6. And so I think mentally that really opens up a lot of people think, okay, I really have a chance now, especially for all-arounders. The way that they were going to do the format of only allowing 2 athletes to compete on each event, there was not really going to be a huge chance for an all-arounder, maybe 1 at the most. And I think now we're going to see many more come back. So that's really, really exciting. Moving on to the Olympic year, you talked about the stressful 2022. I think a lot of people or gym fans may not know how hard 2024 was for you as well, because they see the success that happened at the Olympics. And of course, that's really joyous and it's broadcast around the world, but it didn't start out that way. As we talked about at the top of the podcast, how Jeff Corgan had really mentored both Syque and myself. We found out at the end of 2023 that Jeff really tragically passed away, and his memorial service was held at the beginning of 2024. So, can you talk about how does having someone who had such a big impact on your life and having them pass away, how does that change your perspective on life, on coaching leading into Paris?
Yeah, it was unexpected, extremely tragic. Got a phone call about it from one of my ex teammates. Couldn't believe what I had heard. So I had talked to Jeff like every couple months or even less than that, once a month. Kind of have like a rotation of people I just kind of touch base with. And everything was fine, and we were chit chatting it up. So when that happened, it just kind of, I was in shock. I was in shock, one. And then immediately my brain's like, okay, I got to like tell the community. So I was like on the phone for the next 2 days, just calling up all the people within the community that I had known, that I knew Jeff. And so I was just like, I didn't even have time to like process what was happening. And anyways, when he had a celebration of life at the beginning of the year in January, I literally flew from a meet, came straight over. I was asked to speak at it, and I was like, I couldn't even believe it, to be honest with you. And I was honored. I said, of course, no problem. So I put something together, and he had nice tables set out with like all the memorabilia and stuff. And it was like, and there's a ton of people. It was so cool. It's like a ton of Michigan people, ton of people from like the OTC. You know, like Brett was there, Dave Durante, some of my heroes. You know, Jason Gatz, like all these people that I looked up to and known growing up, and they're just friends of Jeff's, and it was really nice to see the positive impact he had left on so many people, um, and the positive impact he left on me. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for Jeff. And so that he left, super important person in my life. I'm grateful to have known him, and it was the thing that really hit me at home was kind of all the memorabilia out there, and there was a section of like all the competitions he coached at internationally, and he had saved like all of his credentials from all those competitions we went to together. It was so like, made me cry. It was so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff's legacy, I think, will live on for a long time, not only for the impact he had on the athletes, but also the just everyone in his life, and his love for gymnastics was so infectious. And I'm glad that the way that they chose to remember him was a celebration of life, because I think that was the best way that he could have been honored. I do want to move on into sort of chronologically what happened leading into the rest of the year. So pretty soon after Jeff's memorial service was Winter Cup, and there were some really big highs and maybe some lows from Winter Cup. Shane winning day one, I think, of Winter Cup was very important, because when I had talked to Shane the previous year, I thought he was quitting. I thought he was, the way he was talking, he was like, I don't know that I'm coming back. Like, I'm in a lot of pain. And to see him show up and be so prepared, I was like, whoa, where did this happen? And then you had, Steven Nedoroscik, who hit a lights out set day one and then fell day two and ended up losing that title to Patty Hoops. And so as a coach, you're going into this Olympic year. What are your thoughts on maybe who is going to be in that shot for that Olympic team after Winter Cup?
I think it was too soon to tell at Winter Cup. My goal as a program was to go in as a very prepared team, and I think we did that. I think after day one, we had someone in first place on everything except for vault, because we didn't have a guy do two vaults. But I think Shane was first on floor, Steven first on pommels, Alex first on rings, Curran on P-bars and high bar, and Shane was sitting in first in the all-around.
Mm.
Oh, and Brody competed as well.
Yes,
So
Brody came back.
So we had for me personally, 2023 was a bit of like, we were figuring our stuff out. Everything was new. We're getting new people. We're trying to figure out how this whole thing works. And then by the end of 23, like, okay, we figured it out. That just, let's go into 2024 and show everyone what it is. And so I think Winter Cup was hugely successful, not perfect, but successful nonetheless. Shane at the end of 23 could barely walk because his back was pretty beat up, but got him back into shape and was able to get back on all six and do a really good job. Brody's first national competition back since his injury in March of the previous year. Just his story is just crazy. It was 11 months from learning how to walk to competing at the Olympics, starting at Winter Cup where people didn't think he would even land, and he did 3 events. And I even submitted an injury petition, like he's still injured, but then he straight up made national team anyways.
Yeah.
Threw out the petition. And then Curran, I think from well, let's before we get to Curran, Alex did a great job hitting his routine, but Winter Cup is always kind of a questionable one because he's won like every Winter Cup and has made the team like half the time. It's a weird situation. So I was more upset about that he didn't make it because he just wants to compete internationally. With Steven, it was heartbreaking when he fell on day 2. But then they still put him on team. I'm like, okay, well, like, we'll take it. And then I think actually the talk of the meet was Curran Phillips coming in, going lights out on all 3 of his events: vault, P-bars, high bar, particularly P-bars and high bar, particularly P-bars, doing some pretty incredible routines and executing at a high level, breaking the 16.0 mark. So leaving Winter Cup was more relief than anything. I'm like, okay, like we put all that work in and it was for something. It wasn't like a waste, like they're in the right trajectory. So
Yeah, I don't think domestically many of the fans quite understand how competitive Curran's parallel bar routine actually was. There was a lot of talk of, oh, it's Winter Cup, it's overscored, but I had like coaching contacts in China who were watching that routine and saying that they were really nervous to have him go up against Zhou Jingyuan. And I think that's a pretty big statement, and I hate that Curran ended up getting, injured at nationals and not being able to show his full potential, because I absolutely believe he had a full shot to make that Olympic team and certainly win a medal at the games on parallel bars.
Yep, you and I both. I think it's kind of that's the brutal nature of the sport, right? You can be at the top of your game and something kind of fluky happens, which is what happened when he injured his thumb in a warm up on vault. It was pretty bad. It was in bad shape, but like he was like, I'll do what I gotta do, coach. Like I'm not, giving up this opportunity. So he went for it, and I'm so proud of him. But yeah, Curran was a guy who I think arguably it would have been easier for him to win an Olympic medal than it was to make the U.S. Olympic team, just by the situation. And I think his gymnastics speaks for itself. I know there's some people out there saying, oh, it's just domestic scoring. I mean, I watch that routine every day in practice. I'm like, holy crap, it's pretty good.
Yeah. So Curran gets injured, right? You have this kind of like dichotomy of things happening. Brody wins nationals, which I think shocked a lot of people. The hype coming in was, oh, Fred. But I remember, I think I had texted you 2 weeks before nationals, just out of curiosity, like, hey, is Brody going to do all around? And if he's doing all around, what are his start values? And when I got back his start values, I remember texting you, I was like, he's going to win. I had this like full confidence in his ability that he was fully back. And I think he shocked a lot of people with the performance that he put on.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. He did a great job. That was also part of it for me as a coach, is like, if special gymnast like Brody Malone comes in, even though he's injured, it's still a responsibility I feel like I have for him, and honestly for the country, to make sure he's good to go, because I think we still need him in this last quad for that Olympic team to have a chance at the medal. And my goal was, as the process was going and as he's progressing, he's ahead of schedule, he's behind schedule, we're just like getting stronger, trying to setbacks here, but then like breakthroughs here. He took it in stride. I mean, worked super hard. I mean, he was, if you take kind of all his training together with his PT, his doctor, his strength and conditioning, his gymnastics, his cardio, it's like he was like working out from like 7:30 a.m. to like 6 p.m. like every day, like, and it's just like all these different sections of training. Like medical
Mm.
is its own training, gymnastics is its own training, strength and conditioning, PT. So he was doing that, and that's why he got so good so fast. And kind of all coming back together with my goal was whatever his start values were before he got injured, I wanted to match his all around start value after he got injured. So how did we do that? Downgraded his floor routine, kept his pommel horse routine the same, or it's basically the same with the E dismount. I was up a 10th. Rings, you got him way stronger. So upgraded rings. Vault was the same. P-bar is actually downgraded. I took out the dismount because um, if he bends his knee too far and he lands short on a double front, it hurts like crazy, and you can't really land like that on a double pike. So I know there was some question as to why he was doing double pike versus double front, because if he took a deep landing, it's very painful. Not wouldn't injure him. And then high bar, I think, was the really showpiece event when we put together really big routine, 6-7 starts, beautiful when he hit it. Um, and so that, that his high bar routine at the end of day one was like, for me, like my kind of greatest coaching achievement up in that moment. And it was just like that, all the emotions came out. I mean, Brody's like cool, calm, collected, and then he lets out an emotion like that's like really cool to see. So super proud of that kid. I mean, he's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, his story is one for the books. And I know I didn't get to see the fluff pieces that NBC had actually made about Brody because I was actually working for NBC during trials in the Olympics. But I kept getting texts from so many people saying that the fluff piece that they made just really made him cry, just because his story. Brody Brody has been through more than any athlete that I think I've ever worked with. Um, Having lost his mom, his dad gets remarried, loses his stepmom, um, comes back from a horrific injury, and the resilience that he displays not only in his gymnastics but in life is it's remarkable. And I hope he sticks around for a long time more because I think he's such a positive influence on the sport.
Yeah, he's an amazing human being, and just grateful to have him at Evo.
Yeah. So moving into Olympic trials, right? So to choose the Olympic team, that we have the 2 days of national championships and then the 2 days of Olympic trials. Realistically, at this point, Brody's in a really good place. He's national all around champion. Steven is somewhat of a question mark. He had downgraded his two routines at national championships. Curran also kind of a question mark, like still fit into some scenarios. Shane also was still in the mix, but really the one person it looked like that would probably be on the team from Evo was Brody. Alex was really sort of out of the running at this point. So can you talk about going in? Was that also did you hold the same perspective that I did coming into Olympic trials, and then walk through each athlete's performance at trials and why you made the decisions you did to downgrade athletes at certain points?
Sure. So I said USA's. Goal number one sounds kind of low level, but was to get the 5 athletes we had out there all on national team, which we did. And that in and of itself was a pretty big achievement because a quarter of the national team, a full quarter, was from Evo, and we had the most athletes out there. And our program, it's only been operating for like 18 months at that time. Like we barely exist, and we, have full 25% of the team. So that for me was like, okay, that's a good check mark. We're doing things the right way. Let's keep that going. And so let's go through the list. I'll start with Alex Diab, essentially just a ring specialist at this moment in time because he's dealing with some leg stuff. He's still tumbling and vaulting, but it just wasn't quite ready for trials. So I think the big success was to get him to trials. That was like number one because he didn't make team at Winter Cup. So then he made it at USA's. I was like, oh, thank you. Like, we're good. Everything here is cheddar. Hit 2 routines, stuck both dismounts. I'm happy. I was like, you did your thing. You did everything you could. And actually, if you look at the team scoring scenarios, he actually showed up a little bit higher than someone else another athlete of mine. Let's go through Curran Phillips. Next up, so we alluded to an injury during the warm up on vault on USA Championships. He jammed his thumb into the table, effectively like doing tons of damage all around in there. It was in bad shape. Still gutted out a P-bar routine. Barely able to like close his thumb. And the thumbs are pretty important in gymnastics, and particularly on P-bars and high bar. So USA's was a little bit crazy. Didn't sleep for a few days because we're trying to figure out, okay, strategically, how do we do this with Curran? Is there even a shot? What do we do? And so we basically came to the conclusion, like, we're like, okay, day 2, jump up on the high bar, see if you can even swing. Like we met with medical. It said, it's not the best idea, but there's no time. Like if you're out now, you're actually out. If you can push through, like if you are careful about it, you won't cause more damage. That's basically how we looked at it. So we started figuring out different ways to catch the bar. It was like crazy. And so day 2, like warmed up, went straight to the high bar, and he's doing giants. Like it's not working. And I'm like, all right, jump on my P bars. It's in so much pain. I'm like, all right, scratch. We're not doing it. Write a petition. A very strong one. And so I felt pretty confident that was going to go through because his whole 2024, even actually end of 2023 from Pan Am Games, came back with 2 gold medals, all the way through till this point. He was like unstoppable. He actually hadn't lost the event. He hasn't lost an event title on P-bars the whole time. No one beat him. And so internationally, domestically, anyway, so had to petition him through. So we were just kind of on eggshells that whole time, waiting to see him get through. Next up, Shane. What an incredible performance at trials for Shane Wiskus. That was just like so inspiring and special to watch him do that. It was so cool, like at home, in front of a home crowd in Minnesota, just going lights out, crushing routines. It was like, like makes you want to cry. It was so cool to see him like perform like that. And I'm sad he wasn't named to the team. I thought, in my brain as we're going through the process, I'm like, oh, he flipped the script. He's back on. But the numbers are the numbers. So, he didn't make it. And that was a pretty tough pill to swallow, especially for him. No surprise. It's been a difficult quad from the past Olympics to now. But for me going into the trials, my goal was try to get 2 guys onto the team and a reserve athlete. That was like the goal. And we did do that, but I had moved the goalposts once the meet got going. I'm like, oh man, he might have done more than that. Going on to Steven. So Steven's was a 100% tactical move. That's all it was. Like, he didn't need to win the Olympic medal at the trials. He just needed to make the team at the trials. So we did what he needed to do to make the team at the trials. That's simple.
So can you clarify? It was planned for him to do those like 5-8, 5-9 routines, because I think that there was some question of like, is he just like forgetting his routine, or can he like not do the full difficulty? Like, were those the planned routines?
I'm starting to mix some routines together. One of the days was planned to do a downgraded set, but he downgraded a little bit more.
Okay.
Than the intended routine. Usually he'll take out like 1, 2, or all 3 Russians, and that's kind of what happened. And there's a strategy call in the middle and while he's doing the routine too, because the difficulty doesn't matter if you can't make the dismount perfect. And so for Steven, you probably notice he always flies up on the dismount. That's like critical no matter what. So sometimes a lot of times taking out some difficulty is still a wash. Like he still ends up with the same score, even slightly higher or just slightly lower. And so in this case, the D score is kind of irrelevant. All that matters is your final score. So I knew what score he needed to hit and what was the best way for him to achieve that. And so he achieved it in a way that wasn't exactly the way I thought, but he still achieved it. And so I was like, okay, check mark. Now we can train for the Olympics, because when you're training for trials, you're training to make the Olympic team. And that doesn't always look the same as trying to win an Olympic medal. Those are two different things. And then lastly, Brody Malone, coming off an awesome U.S. championships, going 12 for 12, big routines. I did change his floor routine a little bit. He used to mount with the front full to double pike. Decided just to go to double pike. It was just hadn't had a lot of numbers under his belt, and we just kind of timed it perfectly, I think, for championships. But it just wasn't working out, so he actually downgraded floor. The rest of the routines stayed the same, and just some. I think you had told me to talk about high bar. So high bar at the meet was not what was expected. And so he had a little bit of a dip at trials, but still, after 2 days, was only like 4/10 behind first place after having like 2-3 falls essentially. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Like he needs to come down a little bit because like this was a light speed training to be ready for U.S. championships. And so at the end of the trials, people have asked, like, did you know who was locked in? I was like, well, Brody's probably locked in. And then just kind of talking to people and looking at the numbers, I was like, Steven's locked in. And so now I'm like, okay, who are the other guys? Fredrickson for sure. And then it kind of came down. I was like, I didn't know enough of where Asher was standing or where Paul was standing or where Shane was standing or Donnell. So like those, like the last two spots were kind of like hard for me to follow on the floor. But there was a coach on the floor who was running the numbers in real time. So I pretty much knew what the team was before we got in there, but I was hoping it wasn't accurate. I knew it was accurate in, my brain, but in my heart, I was like, oh, come on. It was, as a personally speaking, like sad I didn't see Shane's name on there because I thought he flipped the script, but numbers don't lie. So I kind of knew. So during in the room, I was like, oh, I'm hoping it's not what I just read. So I was already preparing for like, okay, I need to comfort him. I need to congratulate him. I need to like give him a high five. Like already coming up with a strategy on how to best like approach each guy.
Yeah, I actually did not know that there was a coach also crunching numbers. Like we were crunching numbers up in the NBC booth, and I know NBC has gotten, I guess, some backlash for announcing the team before the athletes knew. And I think, like, my sort of perspective is like if you write a selection criteria that anyone with an Excel document can figure out who the team's going to be, like, I don't think you can be mad at people for like running the numbers, trying to figure out who the team's going to be. But I do wish that maybe they'd been able to get the athletes back a little bit quicker to be able to tell them in person. So from Olympic trials, you had a little bit of a downtime, and then you go to France for a training camp. You're not in Paris at first, but just kind of like getting used to the time zone and the equipment, whatnot like that. You move into the Olympic Village, and then it gets time for Olympic qualifying. And for the past few Olympic Games, let's go back to like 2012, the U.S. has qualified, like they qualified fairly well in 2012 and 2016, and then more or less imploded in team finals. And then this Olympic Games, they sort of had their mishap in qualifying. And I'm curious, was there any sort of direction of like, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself? It's okay if there are mistakes made, or did the semi-implosion that happened just happen on its own accord?
Okay, can I take a step back because there are some crazy stories going into the Olympics, and I think
yes,
to hear it. So
please do.
People may have seen some photos, like at the Paris camp or at the France camp, and like Brody was wearing a mask.
Yes.
Like, what's going on? What's going on? Crazy situation. Right before we left, it was the day we were supposed to leave, I think, was a Wednesday. And in the training days before, so we were training Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Brody was like declining in terms of like training. He's like, oh, I'm just so tired, or my hands are really hot. They're like really, my hands are hurting. I'm like, what do you mean your hands are hurting? You do high bar. They're not allowed to hurt. Like, you better like suck it up. Is what I'm thinking in my brain. Hands are hurting, my feet are hurting. I'm like, what the heck? And then he's just getting tired really quickly, and I could just see him like just like declining, right? Just like, like, all right, well, whatever. Get through Tuesday practice, was okay, and then I get a call, We had a call from our trainer, Steve Pachera. He's also the head trainer for the men's program, men's senior team. He was at the Olympics, in fact. And he's like, hey, Brody got sick. I'm like, yeah, I thought so. What is it? He's like, hand, foot, mouth disease. I'm like, what? I was like, my 2-year-old daughter got that, like, from daycare. I'm like, what daycare is Brody hanging out at? Like, what is going on? I don't know what it was, but he had hand, foot, mouth. And so I was like, so, okay, what does that mean? He's like, well, he can't travel because he's contagious. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, our flight's tomorrow. He's like, yeah, this is, and I was like, well, when's the earliest? It's like, based on symptoms. And then I became a hand, foot, mouth specialist. I, chat GPT, Googled it, and just like, what are the symptoms? When is the timeline? When does the clock start? Like, they're like, we can't put him in a fuselage, like, full of people because you'll get him sick. So he's got to, like, be past that stage. And then and so, Brody was mentioning the hands thing, and actually that was actually the start of the symptoms. And basically, like, they're like, it's kind of gross, but it's like these, like, pus-filled pimples. Essentially, they need to, like, start popping open, and then once they start scabbing over, then you're, like, not contagious. So he didn't show me his hands, but luckily he was doing doing Zoom calls with Dr. Lowry, Steve Chair, like, Dr. Cruz. Like, I was, like, on the phone call all night, and basically, like, finishing packing up, I was just, after everything I heard, I was like, yeah, we're not going tomorrow. Like, it's not going to happen. There's no chance we're going to get on the plane tomorrow. Zero chance. Called up Brett. I'm like, what do you want me to do? And do you want me to come up with the team? I was like, Sam's already going to come up, and, like, have some other coaches. And, like, do you need me to, like, do assistant coaching duties? It's like, nope, just stay with Brody. Come with him. We came up with plans where, like, if we came 3 days later, because our travel was now set for, like, Saturday instead of Wednesday, if that happened, then we'd have to meet them at the training, like, at the high performance center, drive down to the village, and then jump into training there. It was like, we came up with all these plans and travel logistics.
Wait,
And
but that was when the Delta thing imploded, right?
So on Monday, so then the next morning on Wednesday,
Yeah.
I get a call from I think Dr. Lowry. He's like, "Hey, he's cleared." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, actually, he had like those pus-filled pimples or whatever like 3 days ago, and they're scabbed up now." I'm like, "Holy crap, are you serious?" I'm like, "I haven't even finished packing yet. I just stopped packing." So I was like, "We're not going." I was ready to get back in the gym. And so then we go, everything's good. He just had to mask up for like a day or two, is recovering. So that's what the mask situation was. He's fine. But then that Friday or Saturday, the day our flight would have had to take off, the whole Microsoft meltdown happened. And I was like, oh my God, if we wouldn't have gotten on that flight, like, we wouldn't have made it. We'd been even more late. So it was a serendipitous, crazy situation just getting to France.
Yeah, I got to experience that firsthand as everyone who is working at the Olympics has to fly on either Delta or Air France. And so as they were trying to get me over for NBC, like, my flight, everything was canceled. And luckily, I had the option to upgrade myself from NBC buys you an economy ticket, and I used points to upgrade myself to business. And so the only flight that they could get me out of that day was a business class seat. And had I not previously upgraded myself, the next flight I could have gotten on was like 4 days later, and I would have missed all of podium training, which was like one of the main reasons I was there, because I was supposed to be watching athletes to see, are they making changes to their routine? Do they look sloppy? Do they look like they're ill? Like, that's my job. And that would have been, not an athlete. Like, I still had an important role in all of that. And I can't imagine the stress that you were going through trying to figure out how to manage all of that. So speaking of stressful situations, right? We're going into Olympic qualifying. I don't think that there's any question that even if the US has a really bad day, like, they're still getting into finals. So I don't think there's stress really from that perspective. But I don't think that qualifying went exactly how anyone planned either. So can you sort of walk me through, as the assistant coach, what are you seeing unfold throughout this process?
Yeah, totally. So just one step back, which is podium training, which in my opinion, I actually thought went pretty well, but then I heard viewers were like, that was not good. But there was, like, kind of planned things in there that, like, visually doesn't look good, but, like, got the job done that we were trying to accomplish. That's not so obvious when you look at it. But to me, I was like, okay, everyone got a feeling for the equipment. We had plans like these events are doing routines, these events are not doing routines. And so that's a new change. That's a new kind of change led by the coaching group and the athletes themselves. It used to always be podium training is a 1-on-6. You do routines. Everyone does routines. And the philosophy behind that is you don't want your first routine to be the one you do at the Olympic Games, right? You want to get a routine under your belt. That's the thought. But after talking with the athletes and coaches, it's more about getting comfortable with the apparatus rather than do that routine that probably wasn't well prepared for that day to do that routine anyways. It's better to get comfortable with all the equipment. So, anyways, that was kind of the plan. There were some things that were a little sketch, but nothing was. Everyone got everything they needed to get done, even though it didn't look the prettiest. Like you had to put a check mark. Okay, did I do this, 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 and this? Yes. And so, just that was from our coaching staff perspective. Now going into prelims, everyone looked pretty good. And then the back gym warming up, everything looks fine. Starting on horse, who was first up? So I think was it Paul or was it Brody? One of those guys. It might have been Paul. I think Paul was first because we wanted him to be the first guy up in the final, so we wanted him just to get that start off position. And in the qualifications, he didn't hit his routine. So then in the uh, podium training, he did not hit his routine. So then to see him hitting qualifications, we're like, all right, we're off to a good start. And then it was between Frederick and Brody. Frederick got through, and then Brody falls. I was like, well, that was strange because he hadn't missed a single pommel horse routine. So that was like, all right, that was fluky. Just move with it. And then Steven did a gorgeous routine, still downgraded. I think he still took a Russian out. The
I
goal,
think he
the goal
was he 6'2" or 6'4" in
four,
qualifying.
6'4". He never did above a 6'4", and 6'5" is with the triple Russian. So he just dropped. I think he never got above a 6'4". So it was supposed to be a 6'5". Doesn't matter. Still qualified, like tied for first or whatever into the final. So that was good. Rings was for the most part fine. And then obviously I'm watching Brody's. I was like, you missed. That was weird. But then Rings was okay. Vault got through. I thought Asher did a really good vault and was underscored, to be honest with you. And I feel strongly that if we were in a different subdivision, he would have made the final. That's neither here nor there. But then Brody like almost falls off the landing. I'm like, what was that? That was strange. Frederick did great. Paul did great. Oh, Paul had a couple of weird wobbly steps too, I think, but his was scoring higher. Going to P bars, I think everyone hit great routines. So it was like, okay, we're back on track. We're doing good. Going to high bar. Oh God, high bar is now giving me some PTSD, and not because Brody had a meltdown, but basically at some point during the entire competition, either in qualifying or in the finals, every gymnast got their layout Takacha downgraded at some point. So I was like, okay, I guess we're not doing layout Takachas anymore. So Asher gets through, ended up doing a pike Takacha like on purpose, but then like the backdoor something, there's a cow hop. I was like, oh my God, survived, stayed on, no problem. Paul does a good routine, clean routine, no problem. It was I think Brody was next, or maybe it was Frederick. I forgot what the order was. Frederick nailed. I'll just go to start with Frederick. Frederick nails a great routine, but got his pike to or his layout Takacha downgraded, which precluded him from making the final. Which we all saw what happened in the high bar final. You know, that was a for medal. You know, he probably gotten 2 medals there. So that took him out of the high bar final, unfortunately. And then Brody, I mean, there's no other word for it, had a meltdown. It was heartbreaking to see. And that was at that moment when, like, for me, you know, my math brain is like, well, he's definitely lost that final, but he's probably out of the all around too, for sure. Like, you can't, 3 falls at this point. It's like nearly impossible to recover from. So yeah, he did his half talk, Lucan way too far, tapped pretty late. Got back on, did Casina, came in close, or was far, and then did Coleman put it in close, and then he had this weird kip up thing, and then finished the routine as best he could. But it was, you know, it was pretty much over. So that was just like going on the floor. The 3 routines were good, and at that point it looked like Brody had a bad, you know, kind of felt bad for himself and didn't get out of the funk, and so he also had a fall. So really, most of the problems came from Brody when you think of bad meet and a bad team scoring situation. Now, how does that relate to stuff in the past? Well, for me, I'm like, well, China barely qualified into the last team final, and they did pretty good. We keep winning the team qualifications and we keep losing the medal. So how is this a bad thing? Like, we got to try something different. So I at least told myself that, or lied to myself to make me believe it, because it wasn't great. And I'll be honest, that evening, Brett and I were watching the rest of the subdivisions, and I was like, well, there's no way we can win a medal. Like, just watching the scores and the results, I was just like, oh my god, we're so out of it. Even if we hit, that's what I was like thinking in my brain. I was like, we're completely out of it. Anywho, moving forward, I was like, okay, well, well, we train to either start on floor or pommel horse, so there's a good chance that even if we have a bad meet, we'll finish top four. Well, we finished fifth, so now pommel horse is the last, and I'm like, oh no, oh no, my pommel horse specialist has to go last on the last event. All right, that's a future problem. I was like, that's a later problem. Let's figure out like what's going on because we'll get there. Um, I knew he felt it too. I knew Steve was like, ah, crap, the worst possible rotation we could go. Like the worst. Like I'd rather finish seventh or eighth in the qualifying than fifth or sixth. Like because that way we can skip pommel horse at the last event. Because we had trained everything, like just being prepared for it. And we've trained like cold sets, obviously, but it's still different. It's still
Yeah.
different in a team scenario. Um, so kind of moving into the finals, now I'm like, all right, we gotta manifest '08 when we started on rings. Like that's just us. Like I was like the last time we won a medal, this was the situation. So do you want to feel bad for yourselves or do you want to be hopeful and inspiring? That was kind of the message we were trying to project.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when we previewed the Olympic team final with Connor McCool, and we had talked about this exact scenario of I kind of wonder if USA is going to start on rings and are they going to have their '08 moment, and really thinking about it, I knew if that was going to happen, then one or two like historical moments was going to forever have ended because up at that point Stephen had never hit an international team final, but he had also never fallen if everyone before him had hit. And so I was like, well, one of these two things is going, like, once they got through the 17th rotation, I was like, one of these two things is going down. Like either he's gonna not hit or he's going to become the hero. And as Justin, so I was one of the researchers for Justin Spring, and he and I had talked repeatedly with the NBC leadership about, hey, like this is going to be a huge make it or break it moment, and really just trying to emphasize, especially with his perspective, having been on that '08 team and watching, waiting for Sasha to go up and like, oh, Sasha hasn't hit a routine all season either, and now he has this one responsibility to hit at the Olympic Games, and he did it. And so Justin Spring, to his credit, the entire time said, I believe Steve's going to hit. I believe, like, over and over. He was the person, and he was like, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. Never doubted him once. And so, unbeknownst to us, is our boss, Sarah Hughes, who is a phenomenal and brilliant woman, was behind the scenes creating this like countdown clock for Steven to go, which is really, I kind of think, what helped propel him into stardom. But we didn't know that that was being worked on. So that's just kind of a cool behind the scenes moment from the NBC side of things.
Yeah, no, the countdown clock was everything. Obviously, I didn't see it. I was freaking out. So on the for Steven, I mean, I knew the stats. I knew everyone saying, "Oh, well, he didn't hit if he did this, and this situation he never hits." This situation, I was like, I gotta like block all that out. All that matters is this actual moment, and literally, those meets don't matter. The only meet that matters is the meet you're in, right? And
Mm-hmm.
whether I believed it or not, I had to project that confidence onto Steve, and he was ready to go. I mean, it was he like we there's always this goal of peaking, right? Peaking in the sport, and like he was peaking. It was like everything like came together at the right moment, right time. It was his moment. He was ready for it, and so you got to just kind of block all that out. We had like a very specific plan of action during the meet. Like once we go to high bar, he goes into the back gym, starts warming up back there, so he's not actually cold. So he was missing during the floor rotation or most of it until the back, but that was all planned. Same thing with Brody. So like me, Brody, Sam, and Steven were in the back gym warming up horse because Brody wasn't doing floor. So it's kind of cool because we were doing just kind of like honestly, like a team inter squad, just back
Yeah.
there warming up. So it was cool because it was a little bit away from the craziness of the arena. It was just like we're just training, and it was like it was a nice reprieve from the tension and the competitiveness out there to just go out there and just swing horse, just do your gymnastics in the gym, feeling good, loosey goosey, like having fun. Steven was rocking everything. Um, and then we go in there, and then even if you're super well prepared and everyone's hitting, and we're not looking at the numbers so closely on the floor, although there was a a funny instance. So Sam was on the floor on Palmer. So the coaches are trading spots on who's on the floor. So I was on P bars and high bar. Jordan Gerenstrom was on floor. Grant was on the first two events, and I left Palmer horse. Sam was out on horse. And so I'm in the tax zone, the transfer access card zone with Jordan and Grant, and we're like watching the routine from the corners. And each hit routine, we're just like exploding. Like we're just going nuts. We're like, oh my God, we're like one more, Paul hits, like amazing. Brody hits, holy crap, he like survived after like the worst meet of his life to like the best meet of his life, hitting 5
Right.
routines for the team. And I was like, all right, it's up to Steven. I'm like freaking out because before we left for the games, I was like, hey, we should have strategy for this. Like qualifications, you do a big routine, try to make finals. Either way, you're going to be competing horse, theoretically, if you don't have a disaster. And then team finals, I was like, let's just play it easy. Let's play smart. Take the bazoogo out, just do a direct stock plie. So it goes from an E to a B. The rest of the routine stays the same. There's like minimal risk. And so when we had our team meeting couple days before the team finals, and we're talking about guys' routines and changing them and stuff, and we changed some other routines, but we get to Steven. He's like, yeah, me and Coach Syque talked about downgrading the bazoogo. And we're like, whoa. And I was like, pump the brakes, Steven, pump the brakes. I was like, don't make a thing out of a thing if it's not a thing. Because before we left, the bazoogo was causing some issues, but while we're out there, it was a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like money every single time. So I don't want it in his head. I was like, just be confident in yourself. Like, you got it. I was like, just pump the brakes. Let's just wait till tomorrow in training and then let me know. And so that next day, I was like, what's your routine? He's like, I'm doing my routine. I'm like, good answer. So I want him to feel that confidence as well. I don't want to force it on. Like, he should be the one being like, I got this. Like, I can do it. And so train in the back gym, he's warming up. Everything is like money. And like, he's loose. He's, I'm looking at his body, his face. I'm looking at his, just like how he's carrying himself. Like, or is he like tense or all that? Because that will dictate whether or not I step in and be like, hey, just take this out. Nothing. Just golden. So we're going. And now last guy up. And Sam had told me that like Brett came up to him and was just like, hey, he only needs like a 12, 13 or something like that. What routine is he doing? Or no, I think he said, what routine is he doing? And then Sam's like, he's doing his whole routine. And then Brett's like, well, he only needs like a 12 or something. And then well, he's doing his whole routine. And so that moment, they both like turned around and walked away. And Brett's like, oh crap. And then Sam walks away. He's like, oh crap. Freaking out.
Well, and again, for those who don't have this memory, right, in 2022 at the World Team Finals, Steven went to do his full routine, and it was like a shell of that routine. And I think he came away with something like a 12 in that routine. So I think that probably was in the back of their mind, like, do we need to have him downgrade because he just doesn't need to hit that hard of a routine?
Yeah, well, on that note, the routine we constructed also makes it so it's really hard to downgrade that low. So it kind of has a floor.
Okay.
And that floor is like a 5.8. So even if he tried, it would be hard for him to drop below that. That was also part of the strategy of his pommel horse routine, was to make sure there's a floor that's respectable and D-scored. He could still get a 14 plus, pretty much is how we built it. So that's why it wasn't always the hardest routine. It wasn't always the easiest routine. It was somewhere in the middle because the range of the score needed to be something that was usable. And that's also hard to kind of explain and by watching routines. Like there's strategy in the background. So anyway, Steven goes, like hits the bazooka. I'm like, oh my God, we're home free. Goes the E flop. Woo almost comes off. I'm like, oh my God. Say all this, and made the right move. Just took the Russians out. Magnus about a perfect dismount, and I was like crying. Jordan and I are screaming at the top of our lungs, just jumping up and down. the FIG ladies looking at us like, calm down. I'm like, no, no, we're not going to calm down. And we're just like going ballistic. So it was incredible. I mean, all the athletes did like a memorable moment. Every guy on the team had their moment. At some moment, they had their moment. Every guy had like a stuck landing, right? Like Paul nails
Ball.
Asher on P bars, Fred and Brody on high bar, Fred on floor, Fred was a stick machine, Fred on rings, and then everyone hitting pommel horse. Like everyone got their like moment,
Right.
something super special, and for it to all to come together was just like, I remember watching 08. I remember watching that meet, and then I guess being a part of this one was like super special.
So with Stephen coming out kind of as the star hero and in the public's eye, were you starting to get messages from like sponsors and brands and trying to help him navigate all of this as he's being like propelled to stardom, but also he still has a pommel final to go?
Funny story. So obviously is like, I guess it's not obvious, but when you do well at the Olympics, literally overnight, your phone is just like untouchable because it's just like bling, 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 bling. So you're getting over, thousands and thousands. I think over dozen, like 10,000, like notifications. Like it was that much. Like it happens that fast, right? Because overnight, the whole Superman thing, the timer. So he was like the hero. So it was just blowing up, and it for sure affected him. For sure, because we showed up to a practice, the big practice, a couple of days before the final, when he had to like be ready. I was like, hey, make sure the night before, like, hey, make sure you bring your elbow sleeve, your wrist guards. It's going to overprotect your body because it's going to be a hard workout. Make sure you bring all your stuff. Well, he forgot those, and usually wears tights with shorts over on top of it for training. Forgot his shorts. I'm like, wow, this is a great start to the training for your pommel horse individual event final at the Olympic Games. So I was like, looking across, I'm like, there's Emery or Emeyer. Is that his name? No, Emery from OU. Yeah. I was like,
Emery. Mm-hmm.
Emery. So I was like, hey, there's Emery. Go ask him for his shorts. And he did, and he got them. I'm like, all right, well, better be friends with him, like, because you're going to be sharing clothes now, I guess. So he wore his shorts, and then it wasn't a great workout. We're being honest. So that, I talked to him like, look, Steven, like you, like, it's awesome. You get so much attention. You're doing a great job. But like right now, you have one more task ahead of you. From now until the task is over, like, don't worry about any of the social media sponsors or any of that. Just like, don't worry about it. All right. It's too much for any human being. And you don't have time to like figure it out right now, but you have as much time as you need after. Right now, you just need to be ready for pommel horse. Okay. So just like, don't worry about it. Literally shut it off, or just, try not to think about it. You need to be prepared. And like that, I think that kind of like snapped him back in. Next couple of days of practice were freaking phenomenal, and then he had a magical routine in the final. Beautiful. A beautiful routine. Beautiful. I thought it's like, honestly, I thought probably the best routine he's ever done in a major competition in terms of execution, and just the whole package was beautiful. So then everything blew up again after that, because it's like, oh, you got another medal. So then I'm just kind of, I'm their coach. I try to give them some life advice. I've never had 2 million followers or whatever. So I was just like, USAG's blowing me up. Like, who's his agent? I'm like, he doesn't have one right now. It's like, well, he needs one. I'm like, he's got to compete tomorrow. Let him compete. Okay. Like, this will only make his thing better if he does well.
Right.
So I'm like meeting with different agents out there on behalf of Steven, like just trying to feel the Steven vibe. Like, who's going to vibe the best with Steven? It's kind of how I was thinking about it, because he's Steven, he's a very,
I mean, he's a self-proclaimed nerd, right? Yeah. Like, he says that about himself.
Yeah. So I'm also trying to like look out for him, be like, someone that's going to jive with him is only going to make Steven better. So, I kind of said, hey, there's a couple of people here, like I can kind of start it. But like, I'm not going to bug you with it until we're done. And so then there was a few agents, we kind of got on calls together, and then ended up going with Smith and Saint, which is awesome. They're doing a great job with them. All these opportunities coming his way. It's just so cool. And I'm really proud and happy for Steven because even with all this celebrity and attention, he's doing it like authentically,
Mm.
being himself. I'm glad to see the world is seeing like the Steven I know. That's Steven. Like he's just that's who he is. Um, and people like that, and they should because he's awesome. He's an awesome guy. So I think he's done a great job as an ambassador for the sport, as an ambassador for Team USA, and for pommel horse specialists out there who wears glasses.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing moment for Team USA and just for USA Gymnastics and the sport and Evo as well. And um, it's like I think that you really had a role behind the scenes that a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of. So part of right, the US went a couple Olympics without winning a team medal, and so there was this idea of maybe we need to create a bonus program to help incentivize difficulty. And I think a lot of just regular gym fans don't know that you had a huge part to play in creating this bonus program. And a few weeks ago, I put out an article about did the US bonus program actually work? And I ran the data, and there was certainly data that said yes, like it helped in these few areas. And there was also data that said, actually, it didn't really do very much in terms of X, Y, and Z. But what I did say, sort of in the analysis and limitations, was that I didn't have the opportunity to interview athletes and coaches because I think the qualitative data and the mindset is really important. Like, did the athletes buy in? Did the coaches buy in? How did it affect their mindset? So, with having you here, can you speak to how you decided to help start develop this program, who you worked with, and then can you speak to that qualitative side that I wasn't able to present of the athlete and coaches buy-in and how you feel the program maybe was successful or wasn't successful?
All right. Well, let's talk about the start of it. Really, this idea came from I was still coaching at Stanford, and we had three athletes: Brandon Briones, Akash Modi, and Brody Malone, who were going to the Olympic team camp before they departed for Tokyo, and myself and Tom Gleamy. And so we took a flight to Denver, and then we're just driving. We've got a rental van, and we're just driving to the OTC, sorry, USOPTC. And I was just like I already knew like we're behind. We're not going to win in Tokyo. There's like the odds are nil, like literally zero. I was like, what can we do like for this next quad to actually get up there? And I was like, why don't we just add the bonus system back in? And I just started literally in the car on my notes in the car from Denver to Colorado Springs. Started the very first bonus system. Like if you get this bonus, if you get this threshold of a start value, it'd be like 1/10. This it would be 2 and 3 and 4, whatever. That's where it starts. So I have the whole table like written out. And so that was, when was that? Like early July probably. And so that's when it started. And I was just showing the guys, just the athletes, and they're like, oh, duh, like that makes sense. And so whether it made sense or not is kind of irrelevant. What I was looking into was buy-in. And so their response is like, oh, yeah, like, oh, yeah, let's do this. Like that, oh, that makes so much sense. I was like, the numbers could be crap, but if they're into it, that's all that matters, right? Because they're the ones doing the gymnastics. If they feel motivated to do it, that can only be a good thing. There's no real bad, long-term bad effects, in my opinion. So that's where it started, just on the way to that camp, literally on the road. So it's an hour drive. And I put together just like a table. Then over the next month, I put together a proposal, like a formal proposal to, Brad, Jason, the MTC, Men's Technical Committee, and just like basically high performance program, and said like different thought processes. So by this point, the new code of points had been developed and out there. This is like late August. I think the actual date of when I sent it out was August 19th or August 21st, 2021. So this is like right after the Olympics, and there had been no competitions in the new code of points yet. However, being a coach and a judge, what I did was look back at previous medal winning routines from each world championships, the Olympics, and just look at routine constructions and start values and stuff like that, and just look at their routine and be like, oh, well, that routine doesn't make sense. But if he just switches this, then it does. And that's the start value. And he's the best. So theoretically, that's where the mark should be for the start value threshold for the highest bonus, for example. So I took all these routines, translated them over. I, took some liberties because I was like, this guy could probably do layout double-double instead of a tuck double-double. So I would make an assumption based on their gymnastics history, being a gymnastics nerd, looking at what they've done their whole career, looking at their technique and be like, oh yeah, he can easily do this skill, right? So that's the coach's eye. Then the judge's eye was just translated over to the next code of points. And then strategically, if I was coaching this guy, what would I do to make him win or be the best version? So I literally did that for all the medal winners for that whole last quad, translated it over, made a determination as to what this is my personal opinion, what I think would be the winning routine in that entire quad for this next quad. So the numbers I produced, I guess it's not that surprising. Numbers I produced in August 2021, my final column on the table was like the highest bonus given to these specific start values on every event, like floor, pommels, rainbow. So I was either exactly correct on all of them or off by 1/10, except high bar, because high bar was a crap show. But on floor, first place was I think it was 6'6". Was that what it was? EULA. So whatever I had, he matched. Pommel horse 6'7", matched it. Rings, I said 6'5", 6'4", one to match it. Vault, I said it's going to be a 6'0", 6'0", got it. P-bar 6'9", got it. And high bar, I wrote 6'6", even though 5'9" won, but 6'6" won silver. So I was like, I'll take that as a win too. So the whole point of that is that using past data, you could actually make some pretty accurate predictions as to how people would do stuff. And you could actually probably determine what those star values are going to be 4 years into the future. Based on trends, that's why having the coach judging stuff is helpful. So I thought by doing that, I can help Team USA kind of get that next goal. So that's kind of the genesis of that. Now, my opinions on it, kind of the first iteration of it, obviously I'm biased. I spent a lot of time working on it, and but there are some truths to it. I just provided some evidence that you can actually make predictions as to what it would be. If you can make that prediction early enough, then you have a competitive advantage to get there. So that it's basic math situation. And I'm not even a math guy. I still count on my fingers. So then I think the bonus system was a success. Now I listened to your podcast. So this is my take on it, is that it was a success, but not like from the straight numbers data side as it seemed. I think the context is important. So to put it simply, our team's execution rapidly went up because, and now this is my opinion, because the athletes were training much harder routines, when the time came to just maximize the final score, that meant they had to drop the D score. So because of that, in conclusion, their execution score increased dramatically. Now, whether having the highest start value at the competition is as relevant as having the highest score, the bonus system helped to make that highest score happen anyways, because they were training harder gymnastics. So it wasn't like, oh, well, they did lower D scores. Oh, look at the scores. Look at the final scores. Had they not been training higher difficulty, the odds of executing the routines they did compete at that level would be a little bit lower.
Well, and the data absolutely supports that. To have an 11-point increase in execution score over the 2024 Olympic cycle as compared to the previous Olympic cycle where they only increased E-score like 1.4 points. I mean, that absolutely speaks to what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just some of the, like I said, the context is very important in this case where people are like, oh, well, they didn't even perform the D scores. So I was like, well, you missed the point then. You completely missed the point. The point was getting the highest possible final score. And that's what we had to do. And that's what we did.
Yeah. So as with anything that, right, when you go back and look and you sort of take the good and then maybe throw out the things that didn't work, there's been a huge change in the code of points, right? We're going to 8 skills and lots of things are changing. So what from the first iteration of the code of points are you taking? I'm assuming you're part of this process for the next Olympic cycle. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then what things do you think need to be changed? Like, so for example, when I was looking at the data, I was thinking, okay, well, we're seeing a decrease in D score when they're taking away how much bonus there is. So maybe it would be worth having a higher level D score bonus for longer to like Winter Cup 2028 and then have it dependent on like an E score. So say in 2025, you have to hit there's no E score requirement in 2026. They have to hit it 8.0 e-score and so on and so forth. What sort of things like do you think need to be tweaked and changed to make it even better?
So we're listening to all those options about having an e-score threshold, right, or execution minimum in order to be able to receive that bonus. I think a lot of this is more philosophical than the straight numbers, which is kind of like context matters. And so context matters in what is the philosophy we want. Number one is buy-in, right? So if we produce something and the athletes are like, guess it's not worth it, I'm not going to do it. Well, then what's the point anyways? Like if they're not going to do it, then it's all sham. So they need buy-in. But we're open to everything. We're open to doing an execution minimum. I think that's important. I think there's value in there. But if that value if being so focused on the e-score precludes you from being able to feel motivated to do harder gymnastics safely, then maybe that's not the right move because you need to buy in first. So just finding the balance there. Moving forward, kind of like what I think we should do differently. I think the bonus system should be used almost exclusively, if not exclusively, just to select the national team members. Not as the only metric, but a metric to select the national team members, because then it gives them an incentive to do bonus so I can make national team. I do not think it should be used directly for putting together international teams, because the scores with the bonus is not like a real score. So putting that into a team scoring scenario doesn't really make sense because you're not going to get that score. That's like, to me, an obvious thought. Though I understand why in the past that was done. They were just trying to, here's the incentive. Like you do it, those scores will count for your team score, even though they're not real scores. I understand that. Personally, I probably wouldn't do that moving forward. I think you just drop the bonus and get your real score, and that will determine your team scoring scenarios for assignments. For making a national team, I think you should use the bonus because that is huge incentive. Guys want to make the national team. As far as length of time, so we had a truncated quadrennium this last one, so not enough, and we only did 2 years. So it wasn't not enough time, just straight up not enough time. And even then, I think we made some big pushes in a relatively short period of time. I think we made some progress. Whether that showed up in the D or the E, to me, is still progress. If they showed up in the E because we did something, I'm happy about that too. Now this next one, I think it should go longer. So this last one we ended in 24 completely, no meets in the end of 24. I think this next one we should go all the way through Winter Cup of 2028, so that we're still incentivizing this push. And to be honest, like the meets, like the way to make the Olympic team, nothing matters except USA's and trials. That's it. So like, yeah, there's all this other data, but like historically, none of that data mattered. You need to make Olympics at USA's and trials. That's how you make the Olympic team. So use that. Because of that, you still have this January through April timeline of international assignments. You can still play. You can still like figure this stuff out. There is no repercussion. So that's why I think it can be pushed until Winter Cup of 2028. Let's see. I have some more notes about it. So I think just the length of time. Now we're going to have 3 years, a little over 3 years to do. I think that should actually produce some sort of at least negligible movement in terms of closing the D-score gap. And I think going through 2028 Winter Cup are the two things.
Yeah, I think that's all really, really interesting. And thank you so much for providing sort of an inside perspective on the buy-in and the creation of the program and how it could look moving forward. And I agree with you. I think it having the bonus system in place through Winter Cup 2028 would actually be a positive thing for the program. I have heard the idea floated that some of the coaches would actually really like to see the Olympic team chosen with the bonus system in place, and I pretty severely disagree with that. Just exactly as you said, that they're not real numbers, and I think choosing a team from fake numbers is not ideal for choosing an Olympic team. But it does, having the bonus program in place through Winter Cup 2028 allows for it to have an impact on the Olympic team, because that's typically the last qualifier for nationals and Olympic trials from which the Olympic team would be selected. So I was really, really pleased to hear that was your perspective.
Yeah, I just want to add to that because that's important, because if it goes through 28 and that's like one of the last qualifiers to get to U.S. championships, and the bonus system is making an effect on that team anyways because of that. That's how you qualify in. So you have to do that anyways.
Yeah. To sort of wrap things up, we alluded that there are going to be huge changes to this next code of points. And as a coach and as a brevet judge, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this new code of points?
Yeah. Well, we just took the course about a week ago, a little over a week ago in Atlanta. The course was really well run. The materials was presented beautifully. The exam was really, really hard, really hard. So, and the reason is fine. It's that you have to apply new rules to old gymnastics, and so not just like kind of old, but we're talking several quads ago. There's routines from like 2014, right? They're talking about 2016 quad. They're bringing routines back and like, okay, apply it. So what they want to see is how the best judges, like basically the cream of the crop, will rise to the top. Those that can really articulate and know how they're going to judge those routines with the new rules are the ones that get higher categories. So like you'll probably see like some really new young guys come in, because the more codes you have in your brain, you're like at a disadvantage. You want to go in like completely blank with the brand new rules. So it's not new rules, it's just the rules you know. And so that's how I came in. This is my third cycle into it. The first one I like crushed, and I never actually judged a meet ever officially. And I got my FIG brevet before I even got NGJA license. Like that's how it is. So if you just know the code and just study it, like it's not that hard of a test. This one was a hard test. This one you really had to be studying for. I didn't have a lot of time to study. I was kind of freaking out, but I think I passed. I think there's a low barrier to pass relatively, but this one will be hard to pass. But to get high enough scores to get category 1, like for judging at the World and Olympics and stuff like that, is going to be really, really difficult for sure.
Yeah, and like less than half of the category ones were able to retain their rating. Like several of them lost their rating, and I think that just like really, really talented judges, and I think that speaks to exactly what you're talking about of how difficult this test was.
Yeah, and so this one was just a practical exam, so you just watch routines and judge them. It's basically they'll show 5 routines and you just judge execution, 5 routines, and then you just do difficulty, and then next event, next event, next event. Vault is just the just execution. So execution, you can fall within a range, right? So it's like 2.1 to 2.6 off. Like you have a range, and that's like a perfect score. Difficulty, there's only one answer, right? And if you get something wrong, like you counted too many D's and not enough E's, then you get 2 parts of it wrong. You don't just get 1 part wrong. You got the wrong E's and the wrong D's. So that's points off there, points off there. And then if you don't get the right element groups, like then you got a certain amount of points from what the correct number one was. So your D score can just like drop significantly. So that's why D is like, in my opinion, the more important one, because you can have a range with E and it's more subjective. The problem with these new rules is like you're learning these new rules under the understanding that people are going to make routines that make sense. These routines make no sense, and you're
Right.
basically like artificially like scratching off this skill doesn't count because it's repetition. Now this skill does count because now he has 2 too few elements, so you got to bring this one back in. The skill that was actually in this element group has changed to another element group. Oh, he has too many in this element group. Now we got to cross this off. And so with the E score, you get 30 seconds, and you have to type the number within 30 seconds. That's not that challenging. You just kind of mark 1, 1, 3, 3, 1, 1, 5, 1, 3, like pretty easy. Count it up, enter. D score is like a whole thing, and you only get 90 seconds. 90 seconds. And that seems like a long time, but the second the routine ends, the timer goes up. You have to be able to get all the element groups right, all the element values, the connection bonus, all of that accurately. And it's kind of a lot of clicks. It's not the most user interface friendly system. 90 seconds, and then you got to go, and the next routine just goes. So it's like super intense in there. It's like quite a lot. So I give a lot of respect to any of the officials and judges that were at these courses, especially this one, because like it was not for the weak hearted. Like it was hard, and I was like, oh man, I thought I knew gymnastics pretty good. Like, it was pretty hard. It tested you on some. I mean, so some of the hard stuff I can just tell you, like pommel horses. Our test was relatively easy with pommel horse, but the practices were very difficult because just our first practice was a routine that was just straight flares, and there's flare limitations now. And so I was like, oh my God, like this is hard to even, like I had to create new symbols because before a flaring element doesn't upgrade the element. So there's no need to write an F for flare. But now you have to, because you have to count how many flares they did. So if a guy like Keika, whose whole routine is flares, right, he ended up only having like a 4-part routine because he couldn't count half the routine, or 5-part routine. Or I was like, okay, all right, survived that one. Got it wrong, but I survived. Okay, next routine. Li Chi Kai, a guy who all does flares. I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. Another guy who does all flares. I'm good. Next guy. Guy who there's like a guy from, what country was from? Austria, and he only does flares. I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. And it was just like, and so you're like exhausted by the end of it because your eyes and brain and hands literally can't process fast enough to like write. It's nuts. So it was like an experience.
So in terms of like overall composition, are you a fan of the 8-skill routine, or do you prefer the 10-skill routine?
I'm a fan of the 8 skills. I think it'll help for big picture stuff, like prolong the athletes' like life cycle, prolong their athletic career. I mean, to be honest, like I coach the oldest athletes in the country, so like I'm trying to figure out how to keep them in the sport. Like my youngest athlete's like 24. So I have to. So by dropping down to 8, you're hopefully protecting their bodies. Yeah, they're doing harder skills, but still the volume is a little bit less, in my opinion. So I like that from just an athlete health standpoint. Theoretically, we're going to see some cool new skills and big skills. This past weekend, we saw Cameron Nelson do 2 triple backs on floor. Insane. We're going to see some more releases, more variety on releases on high bar. We're going to see some really crappy scales on floor. Like what else can you ask for? So there's some good and bad. I like it overall. There's some specific rules I don't like. I'm not a fan of the scale.
Do you agree with my take that at least one major championship is going to be lost because of the scale this Olympic cycle?
That's a tough one. It's hard to, yeah, probably. I think on average right now, the scales on floor are not good. Like 50%.
Yeah, they're losing more deductions than the skills are worth.
So there's also a train of thought. Some judges are like, we'll just take the 3/10 deduction. If the judge even remembers to take that deduction, then they'll take it. Otherwise, like we'll take the 3 and then save on time, because time is also an issue. And we'll save on time, not worry about a one-legged stand, and maybe it'll be a wash.
Yeah, I heard the idea of maybe all of the athletes should get together and just unanimously agree that no one is doing a scale, and then probably in like a FIG, like in a meeting minutes, they'll just take it out or something like that if everyone refuses to do it.
Yeah, I saw Mike Burns talk about that. I was like, yeah, I'll get in on that. I'll do that. And then like when the time comes, like, hey, put the scale back in. Everyone else is taking it out. You'll get 3/10. No, but in all seriousness, we're at the course, and everyone's like, "Why?" All the judges were all ex-gymnasts. They're like, "Why are we doing this?" And the guy who runs floor for the world has a great philosophical reason for it. It's artistry, and we lost artistry. I don't think this is the mode of how we should get it back, but he's like, if it's done well, keyword if, then it's a beautiful element and it looks nice. And he showed a picture of a guy doing like a perfect 180-degree split scale. I'm like, so we want everyone to pick up ballet and spend extra hours of ballet to get a perfect scale for this like philosophical approach. So it was a little disheartening because it was like clear, like he's not changing it. Like, nope, we're doing it. Like, because I'm addressing this point exactly. So you're gonna keep it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I do think that there are some really pretty scales. The guys who can do the Y scale with the hand, like those are aesthetically pleasing. But the one that's like the
Airplane.
really bad Superman one,
Yeah.
they just don't look good. I mean, it's great from a content creation perspective. Like if you come out of World Championships being able to do like a scale fail concept video, I mean that's great for me. But for the sport, I'm aside from being entertaining for me personally, I'm not sure how good it is for the sport. Um, to round up this interview, what is one thing that you wish that gym fans know? You know, like gym fans are known for being like really critical of like coaches and athletes. And what's one thing that you see that you wish that you want to address to them?
Well, the first realization I had was that everything in this universe either is or is not ice cream. And that's just a reality. Okay, it either is or isn't. That was a bad joke. Next, okay, the actual thing is for me and for what we're doing at Evo, we put core tenets first. So that's humility, gratitude, and 100% responsibility. Those are like the most important things for me and for our program as a culture. And then the gymnastics comes second. And so what I've been a part of here is been crazy. It's been insane. It's been amazing. It's been incredible. And it's been that way because what we're doing, I think, is important. I think allowing athletes the ability to make a living training and not have to find a way to get a meal every night or pay rent so that they can train fully into gymnastics and do this as their full-time job, I think that's important. And I do think that this last year, if the proof wasn't in the pudding, then I don't know what else is. And that was in a very short period of time. 18 months we did that. So it makes me excited to see what happens in 4 years. That's also very stressful, and I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I need to not do that for my own mental health. But I love this sport, and if I currently have a means to help these guys, these athletes, and in greater way help Team USA, then I'm going to try to do everything I can to do that. I love these athletes. I respect them dearly. They're like just incredible, incredible people, and I'm grateful to have been a part of it. I just hope people will hopefully hear a little bit of the insider scoop of what's going on, and will generously help our cause with Mag Foundation USA at Evo Gymnastics, and we can keep this thing going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Syque, for your time and for being here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
For those listening, if you would please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast, it really helps others find Neutral Deductions and learn more about men's gymnastics. If you're watching here on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe. It really does help us out. If you would like to help bring more live men's gymnastics coverage to life, please consider donating. I will leave the Evo Mag Foundation USA gymnastics link in our show notes. And we also have donation links for Neutral Deductions where you can donate via PayPal or Stripe. We have a push to get 100 people to donate $25. So if that is within your budget, please, please, please make a donation. It really does help us out. If you have any questions, comments, or insider tips, you can email us at neutraldeductions@gmail.com. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.